Hello, I'm Joyce Pellino Crane, and I'm the news director at WestfordCAT. I wanted to share some of my journalism knowledge with you guys today, just to help you through some rough times when perhaps you're dealing with the media or you have a controversy and you want to maneuver through it and know what to say to a reporter when she or he calls. So the talk is called Tips for Interacting with the Media, what to do when the news is good and when it's not. So I created this graphic because it's the foundation for everything I want you to think about in terms of when you have a story idea in mind or hope to have some coverage and you want to know like what would entice a reporter to write that story. You start with a hook, and with every story, what a reporter seeks most is the story. So every story starts with a hook. We call it the lead. It's the first sentence that intrigues you and draws you in. And then you include your facts. You add tension. Now, what do I mean by tension? Tension is when you hear the scary music in Jaws, or in a horror movie, you know something terrible is about to happen. In a story, it doesn't have to be scary. It just means that you have something in there that arouses curiosity. And then you put everything in context. Often I put things in geographical context. I'll say like Route 110 slices the town in half and connects Chelmsford to Littleton, something like that. Just to give the story some kind of framework. Tell your story. Just let it cascade down like a waterfall. Doesn't have to be pretty. I like it when it's pretty, but it doesn't have to be. You just tell the story as you know it. And then find a powerful ending. So that usually comes with telling the story. You usually know by the time you finished writing what your ending's going to be. And in this case, it could be a nice quote, a quote that sums up everything about the story from someone who was key to the whole topic. But usually the ending kind of comes, just sort of serendipitously. So anyway, keep that graphic in mind, because in the rest of this is the foundation. This is what entices and lures a reporter. And if you get this down, then you kind of are one step up from everybody else. What are the types of news in Westford? So I've catered this to Westford. I've covered the town since 2002. First for the Boston Globe for 7 years, and then for the Westford Eagle for 6 years as the editor, and now here at WestfordCAT for the past 2 years. So I'm really rooted in this town. And spot news is just basically, when selectmen vote on something, or something current that just happened that is, hard news. When I wrote for the Globe, and I wrote for the Northwest section of the Boston Globe, which was local news, and I always, just about every issue, I had a story in that narrow column on the right side. That was our spot news column, because I loved writing spot news, and they could count on me to produce a story every other day. So I just was always in that section. But there's also fundraising events, business, governmental, cultural, religious, technology, and you could probably come up with some other ideas that I'm missing. But in general, these are the categories that I write about. Types of sources, always government officials are interesting, and I can rely on them for the facts. Public safety officials like the fire chief and the police chief. Committee chairmen are wonderful. They really are knowledgeable and wonderful sources of information. Sometimes lawyers can help me. They can unravel a complicated topic or subject that I don't know a lot about, but they do. Marketing representatives can be helpful sometimes. Business leaders are really very interesting. I actually broke into the Boston Globe in the year 2000 to be a business writer. I had written for the Boston Business Journal for years before that. And so I love writing business, but I don't always get a chance to do that. It's kind of governmental issues kind of trump that in terms of my time. But also leaders of nonprofit organizations. These are all good sources. The reason why I decided to give this talk, even though I've been thinking about doing this for years, but I finally decided to really put it into action because the Disability Commission is a new commission in town. It's actually called the Commission on Disability. And right now, Kate Faniff is the chairperson. She called me with some concerns about the crosswalks that were going into the town center and their the safety issues regarding visibility for people who are disabled. And she thought that they could be made safer by, you could make a ladder figure on the crosswalks with white paint, and they're much more easily seen. So she had this very long discussion with me on the phone. She was talking to me as the chairperson of the commission, and I quoted her and wrote this article, and I attended the next meeting of the commission, and her committee members were very angry at her because they had not been consulted, and they didn't think that she should have taken it upon herself to have this story written. However, she's the chairperson, and they've given her that role, and so she had the authority to work with me on that story. But the thing is that when you are speaking with a reporter, it's very important to realize that you are always on the record, unless you specify that something is off the record. So reporters want to, these are in different order, but reporters want to speak to those in charge. They want everything on the record unless you say otherwise. But as you know, Lisa, because we've had conversations in the past, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to someone who is telling me information, but everything is off the record, because I can't write that story. I can't attribute it. I can't quote the person. There's nothing I can do with that information. Also, this is a little different, really. It says here, reporters won't always listen to unbackground information. Here's why. It's the same reason. I can't. On-background information really does help me, especially if there's a science issue that I don't understand, or a legal issue, or a technical issue, and I need someone with much more knowledge to explain it to me. That is very helpful, but once again, I can't attribute it and I can't quote it. So I don't have a story unless someone else steps up to the plate. There was something in the news recently with the Bob Woodward book on the Trump administration. And in his book, well, he's Bob Woodward. He's, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. So he's able, most journalists may not get away with this, but he was able to quote sources that were anonymous in the book. And they use the term on deep background. He interviewed people on, quote, on deep background, and took notes. And in this case, he did write the book, he did write the story, but most people would not be, most journalists would not venture there or write a book using all anonymous sources. But what they did was they spoke to him on deep background, which was, not they were quotable under the circumstances of not being identified. In my news stories, I don't use anonymous sources at all. I have done that once or twice at most, and with great care, and making sure that I confirmed everything and reconfirmed everything, because you quote an anonymous source, your credibility is on the line. Official documents trump everything. So you can tell me whatever you want to tell me, but if documents are produced, court documents or the minutes of a meeting or a letter, I'm going to quote from the written document because it's in writing. So what does off the record mean? It means that if you're talking to me it means if I'm interviewing you and I'm quoting you, fine, everything, I'm taking those quotes, I'm taking your information, but then you might want to stop for a minute and say, I have something to tell you, but I don't want this to be attributed to me, and I don't want you to quote me. It's off the record. So I will listen to it, I will listen to the information, but I can't use it. I might write it down, but I'll mark it in my notebook as off the record. And then I will always, when we're back on the record, I'll confirm with you, are we back on the record now? And that generally works quite well for me.
Would you say that you can trust journalists to respect being off the record?
The question is, can you trust journalists to respect being off the record? My experience, yes. Speaking for myself, all I know I have to earn this living is my credibility. So I am not going to take chances with that. So, if it's off the record, it's off the record. And I will try to, be meticulous about knowing, and marking it as off the record. So we've talked about this. On background can provide, insight, and there is some value to on background information, but don't expect a reporter to spend a lot of time with you if everything is on background. So if you get a call from a reporter, should you ignore it? No. Don't ignore the call. You're, especially if you're like the chairman of a committee, you've taken on a responsibility. You ignore the call, it's going to, at some point, somewhat backfire. It's just not going to enhance your image. As far as, from my perspective, I have to show I've done my due diligence. If I call and I email and I wait for a response and you don't call me back, I have to put in the story, so-and-so did not return a call seeking comment. And, as a chairperson or a public official, that just doesn't look good. And I'm not doing it to make someone look bad at all. That is not the point of it. The point of it is to make sure that I've shown that I did my due diligence in trying to contact the person. And if there's someone else who will speak to me, I'll find a way around you. So then you've lost control of the story. So what to say or not to say? I am never looking for someone to stir the pot or to lodge accusations. I'm just looking for the truth. So I always say, don't get caught up in the drama at all. If it's a story that I'm writing, I'm interested in it, and what you say doesn't have to be inflammatory at all. I don't want it to be. So how do you calm the waters if something is, if there's controversy swirling around you, which I can't imagine. I've never been on that side of the notebook, so I can't imagine what that feels like. But you can take a risk by slowing things down, just taking longer to respond. You can try to minimize the issue. Don't allow yourself to get sucked into the drama. The one thing about slowing things down is, again, if you don't get back to me, I may find another source. So you do run the risk of, just losing all control of the story. So how do you control the story? Well, first of all, your knowledge is what I'm looking for and what any reporter is looking for. So just be knowledgeable, refer the reporter to trustworthy sources. That will be appreciated. Provide, if you have literature, provide it. If you have official documents, definitely, and share them if you can, if you're allowed to. And just be accessible. If I call or I email, you know, if I'm trying to get something published really quickly, it is so appreciated when someone gets back to me right away. Very much appreciated. So transparency, of course, matters. Documentation could compromise your credibility. In other words, what I'm saying here is if you say something and you're not being transparent or truthful, and then I get the letter or, you know, the smoking gun of, you know, the written document of some type, and it contradicts what you've told me, you've lost my trust. So openness builds trust. So fundraising events, why is coverage minimal? Why is it hard to get a reporter out to your event? I think there are a lot of people who are very involved and committed to fundraising events, and they don't understand why the coverage doesn't happen. Well, there's a lot of competition. The story matters, so find one to attract the reporter. What that means is, going back to my original graphic, find the compelling story. A lot of times people will email me and they'll say, we're having a ribbon cutting ceremony or we're having a fundraiser, can you cover it? And I'll read that email and I'll be like, well, what's the story? You know? So, and the thing I wanted to tell you is I have faced this myself for many years because I do the publicity for the Ride for Live, Run for Live, which is put on every year in July by the Live for Live Foundation. I'm a board member of that foundation. And every year I spend the Saturday before, it's always on a Sunday, so I spend the Saturday before the event calling all the broadcast media in Boston, begging them to come out and cover this event. This is a compelling, compelling story. This is the foundation founded by Jody Marchand. And Jody was critically wounded in an act of domestic violence. Her 17-year-old daughter, Olivia, was killed in that act of violence in 2010. I can't imagine a more compelling story than this one, and yet the media has never come out to cover it. I'm not including, the Lowell Sun does come, the Westford Eagle does come, and WestfordCAT is there, but never regional media, never gotten them out there. So you're not alone. Just some simple tips, you know, if you're dealing with the media, call back quickly. Listen. I don't know if I agree with that one, because I got these tips off the internet. I think it's my job to listen, not your job to listen to me, but my job to listen to you. Get to the point, and keep it simple is really good advice. The stories are not long, so they have to be uncomplicated. These are the little known facts. You can ask, this is really important, and I think it would make a lot of people feel more comfortable. If you are interviewed by a reporter, at the end of that interview, you have the right to ask, would you please read me back my quotes? And I will always do that for someone because it also helps me. If I got something incorrect, I want to make sure that I fix it. But you should also know that you hear the quote, you can't start finessing it or restating it. That's just not ethical. I wouldn't rewrite a quote for you. I would fix an inaccuracy. Never ask to see a story before it's published. I get that all the time. People always ask, oh, can I read the story before it goes to print? No, that's unethical for me to give that story to you. So I wouldn't do that. When I call or email you and give you a chance to comment, once again, this is the biggest point I can possibly make tonight. I'm actually doing my due diligence, and I'm showing that to the readers that I've done that, because I will call even if I know you're not going to call me back, because then I can put it in the story that I did my due diligence by making the call. And every good story has tension. So when you're looking for a story to feed to a reporter, remember that. That's it. And I'll take questions now. We can have a short discussion, or a long discussion if you want, as long as you want, really. For WestfordCAT News, this is Joyce Pellino Crane, and hope to see you around town.